That is such a valuable piece of advice there.
These are the sorts of things that we should talk about right in the first 5 minutes of the podcast.
Started giving people free quotes. Isn't sunshine and rainbows, and isn't, everyone sees you doing so well.
For just being a solo
The
operator.
change in mindset makes a massive difference.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
Touch on the 32-inch stander, because I think that's the one I mentioned. That's your first entry into the commercial ride-on or stand-on mower market.
So
how does it compare with, say, a right stander B in terms of what it does?
So there's, as I said before, we launched the commercial range 12 months ago, and we talked about, just quickly, just a bit of background, the 60 volt and the different batteries for different product. But what we do as a company, and this is just something with our background with Jack Max and spare parts and being in the industry a long time, is we don't launch that product. Oh, Greenworks have sold it overseas, let's bring it in. We bring it in quite a long time before we decide to put it on market. And Australia has the hardest mowing conditions, I reckon, in the world, and also the hardest timber.
Yes, I've heard both those things stated, yes.
Yeah, so it's a good testing ground, and our season's opposite to our US operations, which all OEMs would have. So we can test, and then they go to market, and then we take what they're doing. So the 32 stander we brought in, I think the first one I stood on was probably in October 2022, but we didn't sell it on market till June last year. So it's an exciting product. It's built really to, if you had a right stand or a Skag or a Gravely or even a Toro grandstand, it's built to that sort of build quality. It's a Nightingale fabricated steel deck. We've got our PowerTrack hub motor technology, which is incorporated across the stand on and the zero turns in the commercial range, which we can touch on a bit further. But 8 kilowatts, you're going to get up to 5 hours of cutting time out of that unit on a maintenance cut.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that we look at when you're comparing, if you take a basic 32-inch stander, you're probably running somewhere between 14 horsepower and 20 horsepower out of a petrol machine. That horsepower is getting sent through two belts to your deck and your drive units. So might as well just call it split 50-50 between the two, right? So whereas with your battery machine, the power is delivered directly to the motors. You don't have belts to drive. You don't have that loss of efficiency with a belt system or in between motors or hydraulics, for instance. So
correct.
I have seen, I think some of the electric units run a small hydraulic interchange so that it gives you more of a natural feel between the electric motor and the wheels. But I think most of the battery systems are pretty much direct drive. You're saying hub motors.
Hub motors. So a big part of, and it's probably been a fair part, even once we put these on the market, there is quite a lot of 32 standards out there. Obviously, everyone in the industry, if you're a solo operator or you've got a small crew, if you can improve your productivity and efficiency by replacing a 21-inch push mower with a 32-inch stander or even a 30-inch time cutter or SFC 30 or something, then you can do more lawns and make more money. So we definitely have a fair few out there. Our drive system on our unit it's basically a planetary gear, so uses what like excavation and construction equipment, they use a lot of planetary gear setup. So the little hubcap that is inside the wheels is actually a planetary gear hub motor that's driven off an electric motor. That gives us a pretty good speed, feel of operation, and a lot of torque for acceleration and drive. So two things why we can hit some pretty serious run times even on the 32, but when we get into the bigger units is our hub motor technology and our direct drive blade motors. One of the big things being electric, and this is even on when you go on the 60 volt gear and other electric product, is it's direct. So if you jump from a petrol unit, you're not getting that hydraulic feel, and that's some the lag, or it's too sensitive. So that's something we've been working on a lot, and the beauty about technology and improving efficiency is we can change inputs and change ramping and acceleration speeds all with the flash of a computer.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Now, I
So-
wanted to jump on your machines up at BJ's show last year, but I was so inundated with meeting people, I just didn't get there.
Yeah, well,
So,
we only had about 10 minutes at the end of the day to catch up. So
yeah, that was
they were
it.
pretty popular. There was a lot of joyrides on those machines last year.
Yeah.
Even a couple of kids got on there, so which was really good.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars. Do you want to leave your job to create a profitable and enjoyable lawn and garden business? Aussie Lawn Stars shares the stories, lessons and advice to help you grow a healthy, productive, efficient and sustainable business. Do you want more or simply have a question about what you heard? Contact Aussie Lawn Stars at iCloud.com or look me up, Gary Ashton, on Facebook and Messenger for individual help. Business coaching helps you to have the right mindset and perspective when it comes to daily decision making, planning, or knowing what to look for to improve your business. thinktankcoaching.com.au has helped me, and they can help you move towards your business goals. Visit their website or email them thinktankcoaching@outlook.com. If you want to establish the best practices in bookkeeping, accounting and business structure, contact Adrian from Prosper Financial on 0249 773363. And you all need to head to Lawn Mowing Contractors Australia and the Australian Professional Lawn Contractors Facebook groups for supportive communities focused on our industry.
But yeah, I mean, part of the feedback, especially with demos we've done and people that have purchased these, is the sensitivity. So we take that back to the factory and we fix these things, and we've got a pretty good final product. If you jump from a petrol machine and jump onto our unit now, it's a pretty good unit to ride. The other reason why we get some good runtime out of this particular unit as well is our blade motors. So without boring everyone with the background of Greenworks, like everyone knows that our commercial range has been on market for 12 months, but in the US they launched commercial battery gear in 2016.
Wow.
And even as a backlog to that, Greenworks have been making battery OP since 2006, so a long time in the market.
Yep.
But we launched our first stand-on and zero-turn in 2017 in the US market, so it's not our first attempt at these. They are new, and we are new to the Australian market, but in terms of, that's probably our third generation of stand-on and sit-on zero-turn in the commercial line. So there's been a lot of learning along the way in that market. We had the opportunity to bring the previous generation gear in. We just waited for the OptimusZ, the next generation, because we knew how good the product was and how the market would receive it. So
I think one of the biggest fears, to touch on that section of the mower with the direct drive on the blades there, is what if you hit something and can you damage the shaft on the motor? Or
I mean, I'm not going to say, and probably touches on my background in the mower shop, and how I said our market is probably the best proving ground for any sort of durability of product in the world. Touch wood, I find it be pretty hard for someone to break one of those spindles. So it is essentially a spindle assembly, but it's a deck motor assembly. So it's a magnetically induced 1.8 kilowatt deck motor, and it's a 25 mil output shaft. So it's a pretty solid.
You haven't had to replace one yet? And if somebody came to you and said, look, my Stander 32, it's 10 years old, but I want to get another couple of years out of it and need to replace the motor, are we up for a couple of grand? Or?
No. I think a deck motor for the stand-on, if you bought it through one of our commercial dealers, probably $1,000, somewhere around there.
Okay, quite reasonable.
You'd actually be surprised. They're quite reasonable. I think the OptimusZ, the big 24 kilowatt spindle deck motor assembly, is probably $1,300 retail, somewhere around that, which is, when you think about it, that's sort of a comparable machine to a $25,000 to $30,000 petrol commercial unit. And I know those spindle assemblies are anywhere from $800 to $1,200 just alone. So the big thing with us with commercial, especially on our stand-on and zero turns, is that we give a 5-year, 2,000 hour warranty on the whole product, with a
Yeah.
full commercial. There's no strings attached. You use it day in, day out. You use it at home. Use it in the council. It's 5 years, 2,000 hours.
And that's a very competitive warranty then.
And then part of our background as our company is our service and after sales and spare parts supply is very key. So, you have it for 10 years. As long as we're still the distributor, which we will be because we have a very long-term agreement to be the distributor in Australia, we'll have the parts available and the support through our commercial dealer network to give you that support you need.
So let me do some quick fire questions on the 32 and then I want to ask you about the big OptimusZ. With the 32, people are going to compare it to the Skag and the Wright, so they're and Gravely, but yeah, they're the dominant players in the
dominant
petrol
players
market.
in that one.
So ground speed?
Ground speed is 17 k's an hour. Top speed.
That's pretty quick for a 32.
I wouldn't mow it that. I'd probably mow it the first 2 speed settings. If you're at 17 k's an hour, it's pretty quick, and we have, as I said, about the sensitivity of that unit because it's so compact. You definitely know you're moving along at that speed. But 17 k's an hour.
Multiple speed settings, which means then your proportional controls are going to be adjusted according to what speed setting you've got it on.
Yeah, definitely.
And the blade tip speed, and this will come back to runtime as well, because if you've got multiple blade tip speeds you can choose, that'll affect how fast your ground speed you want to be moving and how much runtime you get.
Definitely. So it's all variable, and it's all on touchscreen display on the dashboard. So the beauty about battery is we don't have to have an engine at a set RPM to drive fast and have high blade speed. We can drive at a low drive speed and have a very high blade speed if we're doing thin grass. Or we can have it on low. So we do up to 19,000 feet per minute direct drive.
That's competitive. Okay, and hand in hand with that is, can I just go and buy a blade from Benny Hoover and say, I want a blade that's the same as the Wright or the Skag blade? Will that go straight on there, or are they a special blade to reduce the weight momentum?
The blade on the 32 and the 36 and all our OptimusZs could be purchased from the dealer, or if you wanted to go through Benny Hoover, your Catch Pro fits directly onto the 32 stander. I think he did a video when he had it last year and it took him about 2 minutes.
I saw that.
I think if you wanted a high lift blade, it will reduce your runtime, but it fills the Catch Pro a lot better. That's probably the only main difference. Our blades are stock standard 16 and a half. Don't correct me on the measurements there, but it's a 5/8 center hole. It's nothing special for our bar blades on our product.
Easy.
But
that's good to know. Okay, so let's park the 32 for a minute. So once you brought the 32 in, you also brought in larger machines, and I think you said 8 kilowatts of battery power in the 32.
Yep.
So, and you mentioned a couple of times, I think, did you say 24 or 22? 24 kilowatts
so
when you're going up to the bigger machines.
We do 3 models in our larger range. So we do a 48, a 52 and a 60-inch side discharge.
Yeah.
And then in those configurations, we offer an 18 kilowatt and a 24 kilowatt battery.
Are they all standards, or have you got to sit down in that range?
We've got standards and sit down.
Yeah. Okay.
As you know, and your listeners know, the larger standard market's starting to really take off in Australia. Obviously, the compact ones have been dominating the space for quite some time, but quite a few guys, and I see it again on Australian professional lawn contractors and LMCA, they've got the 52s and 61s. And I was actually did the landscape show down in Vic here the other week and had a good chat with Triff and Duncan from Skag and had to check over the new big girl that they have there, the XL.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to see that market's starting to take off. You see the big Wrights getting out there.
Well, I made the move to the Wrights about 12 months ago, probably a little bit more than 12 months ago, and started with the 61-inch ZK. And then
How do you find that?
I picked up the 42-inch as well. So the combination of 61 and the 42 worked well for me. So I would say that the larger format stander is absolutely amazing because you get low center of gravity, and people don't understand this till you try and explain it to them. I understand it from riding dirt bikes, right? If you're sitting on a seat, then your center of gravity goes through your backside to the machine at that height. If you're standing up, and same with a dirt bike, then your center of gravity goes to your feet, which is lower than your backside, just in case anyone was trying to work that out. I mean, we could find some interesting positions if we're talking to Ben and BJ, but let's go with the standard position, right?
We'll go with those later.
Yeah, well, let's skip them. Yeah, if you're standing up, your center of gravity goes to your feet, and on a stander, that is probably 2 or 3 inches above the ground.
Above the ground, that's right.
So that gets your weight, which is I'm 80 kilos roughly, down low to the ground, and then the motor is fairly low. When you're talking the ZK, which the motor goes up and down with the deck, so it keeps it really low. You've got batteries that would be in between the wheels, and then your motors are all attached directly because they're direct drive, so that works really well too.
It does. It's a very, I think, on a really steep hill. Our products are all rated for 15-degree slope rating in Australian market, but in the US, they'll go 25 degrees over there.
Well, I can tell you, I went from Walker, and the Walker I was using had off-road tyres on it, so all-terrains or mud terrains by comparison.
Yep.
And I could put it on 22 degrees sideways and pretty much 30 degrees going up or down the hill, depending on which direction you go, because you lose traction if you're facing the wrong direction, but if you gain traction facing the right direction. So the ZK outperforms the old Walker in terms of hill stability and traction all round. So I can imagine if you're talking 22 to 30 degrees, I would imagine the Greenworks would be right up there with that too.
It definitely is.
You're saying you rate it to 15 degrees, but America rates it higher. So I'm saying
rate it higher.
Probably push it a little bit more than the Americans do too.
I was over at our factory in Changzhou last year on the test track, and that was a 35-degree slope. And I'll be honest, I was holding on, but it still didn't feel too over the top on that test ramp because it was muddy and whatnot. It's where they really do a lot of the testing there. But the stand-on, even our sit-on's rated to do those sort of larger angles, but the stand-on to me felt better. Again, like I said, center of gravity, all my weight's at my feet. So, so we do in the bigger range, and we're just about to, I think it's docking at our warehouse tomorrow or the next day, I hope. It's on the docks in Melbourne at the moment. A rear discharge in the 60-inch in the sit-down, which is a pretty big unit we've been asked for over the last 12 months.
This is a good point to start asking you some really hard questions, because the rear discharge is going to be meeting the needs of councils. There's probably people listening that don't work for council. Not a lot of people listen to this that work for the council, but I think when we talk about this machine, they might. But councils are jumping on board with battery zero turns and standards because they meet emissions standards. They've got requirement. There's no budget. Just make sure you've got something that's not running petrol or diesel.
Definitely. So
the tricky question comes in now. How do these compare price-wise? So and I know when we're talking your 32-inch stander, the price is competitive enough that it's not a big stretch for people to go from a petrol machine over to the Greenworks. And it's a competitive machine. A lot of people would go, the 5-hour runtime will do me for a day. What's the price on the 32-inch?
32 inches, just under 25,000, so 24,799. So, like you said, to step up from some of the other brands we mentioned earlier, people can see the benefit in that purely on the first thing we get asked, the fuel. You're buying your fuel up front with battery, and you get a warranty with it as well. So the more you use the product, the better the return and the quicker the return will be. Hope I don't bore too many people. I talk about this pretty regularly, so it's pretty quick off the tongue.
I just saw a reel on this, to interrupt you, saw a reel 2 days ago on this, and that was somebody pretending to buy a Tesla, and they were negotiating the deal on the Tesla, and the salesperson was like, I can't budge on the price, but I'll throw in 5 years of free servicing.
Yeah.
And the person thought they were getting a great deal until they realised there's no oil changes.
No oil changes, and that's it. There's a couple of facets with battery gear, and with our sit-on product. There's the servicing is minimal. I don't say there isn't any.
Yeah.
We got some grease points on the wheels and the casters.
Good to know.
Got to put some air in the tires. Make sure your blades are sharp. No matter what battery mower you have, that's the number one thing. Whether it's a push mower or a zero turn, if the blades are dull, you'll get some pretty bad runtime pretty quick because it's trying to work harder.
Yeah.
And there's no motor. So the first thing I always go on is fuel, return on investment for your fuel costs, because as we're talking about, I was up in Sydney last week, and Melbourne. I left Melbourne and unleaded was $1.75, and I got to Sydney and unleaded was $2.20.
Yeah.
So fuel costs are high versus charging, and then you don't have any belts or pulleys or bearings or moving parts in that aspect. You've really got blades and make sure you charge the unit. The stretch there from a 32 petrol to a 32 battery isn't too much when you work out your time to break even, and then you're in front. Then you couple it with the benefits of vibration and noise and whatnot. But when you want to go from, say, I don't want to go brand. I always go back to the brands I used to sell. But if you go, say, a 60-inch, say, fast track, it's like $15,000 now, I think, in the market, somewhere around there, and you're looking at a 60-inch Optimus, and it's $50,000.
You say 50,000? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think the fast track's closer to $20,000 now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I haven't been in that side of it for a little while, but yeah. So, but our unit isn't built to compete with that product. It's built to compete with, say, a Super Z, which is probably $34,000.
I'm trying to log into my Zero at the moment. I can't get it to log in, but I wanted to talk about how much fuel I've used.
I was going to say, if you've got those numbers, we can really get into it. I do love a spreadsheet too, by the way.
I split up my fuel costs in Zero based on vehicle versus lawnmowers, because I only use fuel in lawnmowers and a backpack blower.
Yeah, okay.
Until somebody gets me a competitive battery backpack blower, then petrol it is.
Keep an eye on this space, Gary, because we do have something very competitive on top of our current backpack blower coming to market very shortly.
Yeah, well, I think the critical thing, I was saying this the other day to somebody, is how many Newton meters of force does it put out, because that's where it's got to compete with the Stihl BR800.
35.
That's up there. That's competing.
Yes.
And then the next thing is runtime. So can you pump out 35 newtons and get them to get the runtime?
Our new BB361. The problem with battery blowers, and I think I've heard someone else talk about this on your podcast and another, is, and we all know this, it uses a lot of energy to make energy.
Oh, yeah.
So our one will run off 2 8-amp-hour batteries, our new model. Our current one does okay. It's moving probably 1,200 cubic meters of air at about 27 newtons.
All right.
And we're seeing some people get up to 100 minutes runtime out of that. That's constant on turbo. But the new one, you'll get, I think, close to the same sort of runtime, 110 minutes. But at that 35 newtons and I think it's about 1,400 cubic meters. It's pretty fast.
I cannot log into Zero, sorry, because I've got all my devices locked up unless I send a pin to my phone, which is doing our video right now.
We can't do that.
Can't do it. I thought it would come through my watch, but it's refusing to play ball, so we'll just close that off.
Right. You can send me that, and I'll do you a calculation later.
I think from memory, I've used about $4,000 this financial year from fuel
which is
in my equipment.
Yeah, we did. A gentleman bought an Optimus when we first launched last year, and he was using $13,000 worth of unleaded per year. He does a lot of mowing, and so his mower, he still has petrol in his fleet, but as you touched on with councils and even some of these contracts that individual operators or are going for are starting to stipulate you must have a portion of green in your fleet. Benefit for us is we have a product that will tick that box and tick the performance box and runtime and capability. So we're very lucky in that.
Another interesting thing putting these numbers together, right? So say that's somewhere around $4,000 worth of fuel in my equipment in the last 12 months. And that's about 300 hours worth of work between the two zero turns, two stand-ons that I've got. Right. And an average petrol machine, I would expect to get, as a commercial machine, I'd expect to get 2,000 hours out of it. And if you get over 1,000 hours, you're okay. If you get 2,000 hours, you're doing all right. You could potentially drag one of those machines through to 4,000 hours, but you might have to replace an engine or a hydro or two.
Yeah.
So by comparison, I'm going 300 hours worth of fuel at $4,000. So you roll that out, so 10 times that much, that's $40,000 worth of fuel over the lifetime of the mower.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think from memory, batteries powered zero turns and standards, you get more than 4,000 hours out of them.
You do, and we did allude to the lithium phosphate battery technology that we use in our product earlier, so we might as well jump right into that. So there's probably 5 or 6 different lithium compounds that you can use in a battery. Most commonly is cobalt or phosphate, and then you've got a few others. The big benefit for lithium or an LFP battery is the lifespan of that battery. So our battery and our OptimusZ, and Greenworks make everything in-house, including our batteries and chargers. Like 85% of our product range is built internally. So I think it's really just the raw material that we outsource. But the battery is the lifespan of our battery and our stand-on and UTVs is 2,000 full charge cycles. So that's 100% down to zero, back again as one charge, as you would understand. Understand battery very well. So, excuse me, if we're talking the stand-on, it's we say 5 hours. Most operators are probably going to get between 4 and 5 hours, depending on mowing conditions. So
the 8 kilowatt will get 5 hours runtime.
Yep. So we'll say 2,000 charge cycles. You're looking at 10,000 hours on that battery before it starts to degrade.
You go the 24 kilowatt system, you're getting a decent runtime out of that.
8 hours, up to 8 hours, and that's real world. I know a lot of I get it quite a bit when I'm doing field days or demos, or you see it. But the worst we've ever had out of that 24 kilowatt, 60 inches mowing knee-high grass in the Victorian Highlands 2 winters ago. So it was wet, it was thick, and we got 5 hours and 55 minutes. So just under 6 hours.
Yeah, okay.
And then some operators are reporting that they're getting over the 8 hour mark just doing maintenance, low cutting. Average, you're going to get 7 hours. So that's 14,000 hours.
Yeah. So best case scenario, 16,000 hours. Worst case scenario, maybe down to 10 or 11,000 hours.
Yeah, that's right. So the battery should be the last thing left on that mower.
Well, it's kind of like human beings, right? If you look at 100 years ago, like you go back to your grandparents, my grandparents, my grandmother actually lived over 100, but on average, people in a couple of generations ago were dying at 40, 50, maybe 60 years of age, just of general stuff which we now don't die of. So the longer your machine lasts, the more you start going, okay, what's the fail point? What's the bottleneck? Where does it fail? If it's not the batteries, is it the motors? Is it the caster wheels? Is it the deck getting bent? And with a residential machine, it's the deck every time, because we've seen that with petrol machines. The decks were the fail point on the pressed metal.
Especially a pressed metal deck,
Yeah,
so we don't have, obviously I'm not saying the machine's going to, and no one's going to, Greenworks Gary said that mower's going to go for 16,000 hours, but our battery, our expectancy is that. And then when we hit that point, and this is a big thing with lithium phosphate over other battery compositions, is that once it hits 2,000 charge cycles, it doesn't just go, all right, well, that's it, I'm done. It'll slowly degrade and maybe lose 20, 25% of its original capacity. So it doesn't just go, all right, I'm done. You might only get, say, 5 hours runtime. And this is one of the key things. Our previous generation had a lithium cobalt battery. So they will generally only get 750 to 1,000 charge cycles.
Now, I'm going to push back on this issue just a little bit, if you don't mind. And, I think it's worth saying, because everyone pushes back on this, but I've got a little bit of battery history there. Hopefully I know what I'm talking about.
I don't doubt it, mate.
other products that the battery has reached its end of useful life, what you see is that drop by 20-25%. But what you notice most is, and you see this with a phone or a watch or even a whippersnipper where you got a battery in it. What will happen is that 25% means that when you put your phone under load or you put your whippersnipper under load, where it might have gone from, say, a 45-minute runtime on the whippersnipper down to a 15-minute runtime, all of a sudden it'll go from 45 minutes down to you can just watch it drop to nothing just as soon as you put load on it. Or same with a phone. Like if you got a phone and you're sitting there going, all right, it'll normally get me through a day. If I don't use it and it's just sitting in my pocket waiting for a phone call, it might still get through a day. But if I pull it out and start watching YouTube, I can just watch the battery go jump because it's lost its capacity at the end of the day. So I can imagine your mower's probably going to do the same thing in the sense that if you're doing routine finish mowing, you'll, instead of 8 hours runtime, you might be down to 6 or 5 hours runtime. If you ask it to do an overgrown job, it might just go, nope, see you later.
I think part of the big thing for us is testing. I think nickel, cadmium, and cobalt and that sort of stuff, you will definitely see that. I haven't tested one that's reached its end of life, but by all feedback, it definitely does take a hit, but it definitely doesn't lose anywhere near what like our phones and that sort of stuff do. So
with 16,000 hours or 14,000 hours expected runtime on these things, you're going to be waiting a while to be able to test one.
Greenworks do a lot of testing, but I don't know if we've got too many out there that are doing 14 or 16,000 hours, that's for sure. They're definitely tested quite a bit because we don't back it with the warranty that we do, knowing that it won't last that long. That's a big thing.
This is why you need somebody in the field that can test it, because I mean, you've heard me talk about the whippersnipper. When I first started battery whippersnipper, I was a husky. I was doing a cemetery, and I'd go on the cemetery and I would run that whippersnipper for 8 to 12 hours in one day with 2 batteries and just cycle through them. So you can imagine those 2 batteries, I've still got them. And
have you? They're still going okay?
To meet up with you and show you how those batteries perform now. They're less than 100%, but they still work.
Still work, yeah. Oh, it's a good battery technology, that's why. So,
yeah.
But yeah, the other key thing that we get touched on we see the videos and you see the memes and you see them in the contractor groups that we're all a part of, the fires and what's associated with lithium. Our batteries in our big gear phosphate won't catch on fire, just smolders if something happens. So
that's good.
A big safety aspect. And we talked about BMSs before. Our BMS is very intuitive on these products. You can imagine we're ramping in some serious voltage into the unit and getting some serious voltage out of it. So our technology is very good in that aspect. But you touched on, we talked about rear discharge. That's an exciting model for us. It's something that probably a lot of listeners aren't really like, oh, why would I want that? If you're doing a roadside contract or a park and you're tendering or you've got a tender through council, then I can guarantee if they haven't required that of your product now in the next 2 or 3 years, trust me, it's purely an insurance aspect, especially a roadside. You imagine you're side discharging all over the road versus the rear. It's just coming out under the back of the machine. We're just seeing it so much around the country. A lot of councils won't even touch a side discharge, even if it has a mulch kit in it. So we're pretty excited to have that unit. I think our initial shipment's pretty well going to be already allocated for. Otherwise we do normal side discharge, and then we got some more exciting larger units coming later in the year as well. So it's a pretty exciting space. It's not a space for everyone when you're talking 50,000 plus. I know with the other competitors in that space, we are the cheapest and probably one of the better performing ones, if I can be pretty humble in saying that. But feedback we get.
So far I haven't tested the Greenworks, but I've tested the Gravely and I've tested the Mean Green. And I mean, each of them have different aspects that make them very unique. So I won't speak to compare. I think they each have their own pros and cons. But
definitely.
I think any battery-powered zero-turn, you expect to pay a bit of a premium for it. And you hope to get the runtime that will make it useful.
That's the biggest feedback we've had, Gary, is councils and that have spent some serious money. You touched on exactly that. They're looking to meet a few things, but the big one, and there's no mandated policy in Australia, not like it is in California, and I think 5 other states are following that route in the US market next year, by no petrol product. But I think a lot of councils are trying to meet certain targets, and we can't take a Hilux or a Isuzu off the road because we just don't have. They're not there. EVs aren't there yet to tow a trailer around, but they can meet a zero emission vehicle policy with replacing it with battery fleet. I know even a local council I dealt with 5 years ago, if they wanted to buy a battery product off me, they had to put in a business case for it, whereas it's the other way around now. A lot of councils have to put a business case to buy petrol units. So
yeah, that's it, isn't it?
It's funny the change in market, that's for sure. And then, but yeah, our product, very good unit. You'll get to drive one pretty shortly, I'd imagine. I think either I'll be on the Central Coast at some stage or one of our other reps. Again, it's each product on the market ticks a particular box and has their different feels and approach about it. Our OptimusZ, we definitely I've spent a lot of time with our programmers and our vehicle engineers in the US market with the sensitivity on that. That machine can do 24 k's an hour, top speed of 24.7. That's transport. But, the biggest thing, again, direct drive, electric sensitivity was the key thing out of the box. But, I just did quite a demo week last week. We had operators getting off petrol machines straight on and couldn't tell the difference. So we've definitely got a good feedback machine and high performing as well. Same thing, 7-gauge fabricated steel deck, 19,000 feet per minute blade speed, packed full of technology. So.
Yeah. One of the things that I see come up with petrol machines, and nobody's really talked about it with battery machines, but in terms of the deck design, some of the petrol machines have had unique deck design introduced in Australia to cope with Australian conditions, because we cut grass low, we cut it fortnightly, whereas a lot of places they cut it weekly and they cut it at 5 inches tall. So here, it seems that the better machines, particularly when you're talking fabricated decks, you go for a deeper deck profile and you go for the right type of blades, the right type of mulch kit, or whether you're talking side discharge and catching, it comes into that as well. But that deck design makes a massive difference to its capacity to cut low and to cut tall grass.
Definitely. And you definitely mentioned that there's been quite a lot of good brands that have in the country and taken a lot of feedback from the distributors to go back and develop a better deck. We can have a 60-inch deck that'll do 60-inch wide, but it's no good if it's not deep. You can only cut as much as you get. You can only get out as what you can get in. So the deeper the deck and the way we cut in our market, as we all know. I remember years ago I had a gentleman engineer from Hustler come to my store, and he just couldn't. He was blown away by the amount of blades that PLP obviously had. Hustler at the time I think they sold more blades in the Australian market than the whole of the US because we cut so low and what we cut. They were one of the companies. I think they did a deck. Gravely got a good deck. I think our deck's fairly deep on our OptimusZ. We don't have a special name for it. We just call it a deep deck. But the more grass you can allow in, and deep deck. It's pretty technical. I'll patent that and send it back.
I think that's fitting for the Australian market. It's a sort of phrase you'd expect to hear from Ben and BJ.
Yeah, say it 5 times really fast. Not on this podcast.
No.
But yeah, so blade tip speed's one thing, but the way the deck's designed and the way you have baffles internally in the deck to help the grass create a path to clear out are very key. And then we all want to cut at 20 and 25 mil. So I know out of the battery commercial units, ours is the lowest cutting at 25 mil. So we definitely tick that box there. I mean, there's only so much you can only there's only so much you can do. Like, you can go and try and mow 3-foot high grass on 25 mil, and no matter what deck it is, it's not gonna do it, whether it's petrol or battery.
Now, I've found cutting at 25 mil, there's not a lot of places that I can get away with cutting at 25 mil unless it's a really nice flat surface. But when I am cutting at 25 mil, the best machine I've got for cutting at 25 mil has some anti-scalp wheels.
Yes.
So if you're talking the difference between the different deck sizes, the scalp wheels come into it unless you're running a small robotic mower, which I love. But
we've got something there too.
Sounds interesting.
We can touch on that quickly as well. We'll touch on some cool new items we've got. So we have anti-scalp wheels on all our units. And then we offer a rear anti-scalp wheel as an option for the side throw unit. So the rear discharge that we have coming has 4 on the front and 2 on the back.
Yep.
And then the side throws come standard with 4, 2 in the middle and 2 on each side on the front. And then you can get a rear kit, much like a petrol unit. A lot of petrol units offer that on the back. And it's exactly like I said, you want to mow at 25 mil. The deck's pretty well dragging along the ground as it is. So you want the idler wheels to be able to float, the deck to float with the lay of the land.
Yeah, I'd say if you're going to be cutting on the lowest cut height, then you're going to buy that rear scalp wheel kit.
Yeah, definitely. I would, especially with battery too. So we talk BMS, and we have two kind of we call two BMSs. I suppose we have a battery management system, but we also have a blade management system on our product. So
yes,
obviously a petrol unit. We're sitting on that mower, and we can hear like our unit is equivalent. I always put it equivalent to say a 40 horsepower petrol unit. But a 40 horsepower petrol V-twin motor singing behind you can hear when you're loaded up, and we can hear it start to stall out, and all right, I've got to lift the deck up, or I've got to slow down here or whatnot, or eventually the belt blade will burn or throw off. With a battery unit, we don't get that. The motors just keep going until they can't go.
Can you hear the blades slowing down? Because I know that's what you're listening for is different, but you'd still hear something.
Yeah, you still hear the blade motors load up. So we use without going, and again, I don't want to bore the listeners too much. We use a Curtis controller with a CAN bus system in our product. So we utilize one big master controller for our 3 blade motors, and then we use an individual one for each of the drive wheels. But it's pretty intuitive system that we use, because if one say that the opposite side to the discharge chute is loaded up, it'll drop the RPM of that motor and allow the other ones to still continue on at high speed to clear the grass out and continue mowing. But eventually you do hear, if it does load up, it won't just cut out straight away. You'll hear it load up, and the blade noise that you hear, because that's all we hear with our product, will drop out. And then it'll just throw an error code, back, big clump of grass comes out, disengage your PTO, pull it back up, and away you go again.
So for all the listeners, if you're mowing through New South Wales and you're cutting Kikuyu, it'll just go flat out. But as you cross the border into Queensland and you hit that blue cooch, you'll just hear the motors going.
Yeah. I mean, our on our low speed with the big OptimusZ, the big sit-on ones, like that's 14,000 feet per minute, and that's just on 80 decibels. So if you're doing maintenance cutting, you don't really hear any noise. All you're hearing is the whirring of the blades.
That's why I was wondering, because that would make sense. You would actually be on the petrol machine, you're listening to the revs of the motor, whereas on the battery machine, you really can fine-tune your ear to listen to the speed of the blades. Unless you've got Aussie Lawn Stars in your ears, then you might.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't hear anything then. You just hear you and everyone talking, mate. Which is you wouldn't even have to have the volume turned up that well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely have to change with battery. And this is just a Greenworks thing. This is with any sort of battery, especially we're talking some of these commercial units, is start a day procedure. You don't have to check for obviously any maintenance stuff, but you want to, check the temperature, pressure of the tire, not the temperature.
Yep.
Maybe put some grease in your casters and away you go. But then the end of the day, you want to make sure you plug the unit back in so it's charged overnight, ready to go the next day. And then it's the same with your mowing operation. You want to hear for the blade noise, not the engine loading up, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we've talked about these mowers for
we've pretty well dedicated the whole with our range of product, Gary, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but we have spent a lot of time on zero turns and stand-ons.
It's been valuable, but is there anything else we want to throw in about the mowers before I start quizzing you on some of the other gear? Charge time might be good.
Charge time, yeah. So on the OptimusZ, it only on the stand on the 32 stand, it's 3 hours through a normal single phase. Currently, our chargers need a 20 amp outlet, just because of the power requirement the charger draws. The OptimusZ is 7 hours. It is an overnight charge, but they're a smart charger. It's all fan cooled. The charger's fully IP56. That's probably the big one. The weather rating of all these products. I get asked, can I mow in the rain? Can I do this? Can I do that? Our whole OptimusZ range of product is IP5, so it's all water and dust resistant.
Okay, so if I bought one of these machines and I'm going, I need a 20 amp outlet. I've got 10 amp outlets and I've got a 15 amp in my shed. Go to 20 amp. It's going to take.
Most households, and I always give my electrician mates a bit of ribbing about this. I have about 5, unfortunately, electrician mates, but they do tell me that most houses are equipped to put a 20 amp GPO in. You just have to if you've got a 15 amp, your circuit's already upgraded, ready to go. Usually, and don't shoot me if you're a Sparky listening, you just have to get the GPO changed. Right. We do offer an accessory that we got manufactured locally by an electrical company that can, much like what a caravan, you go to Bunnings and buy a 15 to 10 amp converter. A lot of people have that. Oh, yeah. We have a 20 from our charger to a 15 with a 16 amp circuit breaker and board. So if you don't want to change your GPO, but you've got a 15 amp, we can offer an accessory for that. Our charger draws 15.3 amps, so it's just over what a 15 amp plug would be. And our certification for our charger is for the 20 amp outlet currently. So
I was just imagining if you go to 20 amp, you almost need 3-phase to supply it.
Yeah, no, it still can be done on a single phase. We've been down that path quite a bit. We are down the path of getting a 15 amp plug certified for the charger, which might add, I think, 15 minutes to the charge time. It won't add much more, but 15 is a lot more prevalent than 20, but that's what we have and that's what we work with at the moment. The touch screen on the OptimusZ is all weatherproof. You can have gloves on. Some of your listeners are all around the country. Like I think yesterday in Melbourne it was 10 degrees and raining all day. So if you're out mowing, you could still use the product. It works extremely well in all weather environments, or whether you're mowing in Cairns.
I was just talking to somebody in Tassie a couple of days ago, and it was
we've had some shocking weather, mate. As a person that moved from our Queensland operation to Melbourne in September last year, I'm experiencing my first ever Victorian winter, and as you can tell, I'm loving it. They think I'm dressed like an Eskimo. I walked in this morning, and they're like, "Did you just come from Mount Hotham?" I had my beanie on because it was windy. It's been raining, and Tassie's copping it as well. But I think some of it's coming up your way, I think, from what I see.
Yeah, we're certainly feeling it this week. But you're not as extreme as my brother. He moved from far north Queensland to Tassie.
Oh, wow. I love Tasmania. I really do. But that's a fair temperature adjustment, that's for sure.
He lost me as a brother. It's just like, see you later, Dale. You're gone.
I might come and see you maybe. Oh, even in summer it snows down there sometimes. So
I know he listens to this because the first time I mentioned that, I called him a dickhead for moving. he calls me up and he goes, "Oh, what's this?"
What are you going on about? What's this about?
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.